I knew that rule by heart. I was sitting near the window, the last seat that was allowed for colored people. And so, as the bus proceeded on downtown, more white people got on the bus. Eventually, the bus got full capacity, and a young white lady was standing near the four of us. She was expecting me to get up. I just couldn't move. History had me glued to the seat.
And people started yelling in the bus, "Come on, let's go, let's move."
Hear those white people complaining to each other, talking. I could see their mouths moving and talking to each other. I didn't know what was going to happen.
Claudette Colvin, the Rosa Parks before Rosa Parks.
I always wondered why I had to go through the back door of the public library, why I could not go into the stacks to get my own books, why I had to go to the colored water fountain.
Starting from the early 1700s, African Americans were slaves, who were treated as property instead of human beings. African Americans were considered inferior solely because of their skin color. In 1877, Congress passed the Jim Crow laws, enforcing white supremacy. One of the Jim Crow laws stated, "It shall be unlawful for a Negro and a white person to play together or in company with each other in any game of cards or dice, dominoes or checkers." The Jim Crow laws made white people legally superior to such an extent that it was considered illegal for an African American to simply play a game with whites. It was necessitated that they were separated in every way. Nearly 200 years later, segregation was a still growing conflict. Many oppressed African Americans with a desire for change and equality started protests. Claudette Colvin was one of these activists. She stood up gallantly against the injustices occurring at the time, and although she was arrested, she sparked a fire that would lead to a conflagration of other African Americans standing up for their unalienable basic rights. Her actions and the perseverance of others eventually led to the compromise of life without segregation.
Claudette Colvin was born on September 5th, 1939 in Birmingham, Alabama. She went to school at one of the city's two all-black high schools, Booker T. Washington High School. Colvin was a scholarly student and was inspired to find her voice by two teachers at Washington High. Her sophomore English teacher, Geraldine Nesbitt, who exposed students to classic texts involving human rights and democracy, and her history teacher, Josie Lawrence, whose lectures explored the trajectory of the African distribution. Nesbitt and Lawrence also taught a special Negro History Week unit in February of 1955 during Colvin's junior year, motivating Claudette Colvin on the afternoon of March 2nd, 1955.
On Wednesday, March 2nd, Claudette Colvin came out early from school and boarded a bus on the Montgomery City lines. During that time, African Americans were supposed to sit in the rear of the bus because it was de jure for African Americans as a sign of inferiority to white people. But Claudette Colvin decided to sit in the middle. At the time she boarded, the bus was empty. However, people slowly trickled onto the bus, and eventually it was full. At the next stop, a white woman boarded, and upon finding no seats available, because Claudette was sitting in a seat meant for white people, the bus driver said, "I need those seats." Later on in an interview, Claudette Colvin said that she was feeling rebellious that day, having learned about the Constitution in her social studies class. She remained silent and refused to give up her seat. The bus driver, infuriated by Claudette's actions, drove to Court Square and called for a transit officer to issue an arrest. However, the officer did not have the authority to make an arrest. Ergo, the bus driver drove up to two Montgomery City policemen. The policeman ordered Claudette to stand up, but she affirmed, "No, sir, it's my constitutional right to sit here as much as that lady. I paid my fare. It's my constitutional right. After stubbornly refusing to give up her seat, Claudette Colvin was dragged off the bus, but continued to shout relentlessly, "It's my constitutional right."
After she was driven to the police station, the policeman filed an arrest report in which they falsely accused her. They said she was struggling off the bus and all the way to the police car. After we got her in the police car, she kicked and scratched me on the hand, also kicked me in the stomach, even though Claudette Colvin was handcuffed and unable to move. While Claudette was locked in a cell, her classmates who were on the bus rushed home and described the situation to Claudette's mother. She quickly conversed with her pastor, Reverend H.H. Johnson, sped to the police station, and picked up Claudette from her juvenile prison. Her mother was not angry. Rather, she was proud for her daughter's courageous actions.
Claudette's mother was not the only person who was impressed with her act. This behavior later inspired Rosa Parks to do the same thing. Fred Gray, a civil rights attorney who litigated many major civil rights cases in Alabama, stated, "If there had been no Claudette Colvin, there would have been no Rosa Parks. Because of Claudette Colvin, 9 months later, Rosa Parks stood up for her rights on the very same bus line." Rosa Parks' arrest sparked the Montgomery bus boycott, which started on December 1st, 1955. During the bus boycott, African Americans avoided riding the bus transit despite the numerous troubles that it brought. They rode taxicabs and rode bikes to travel, harming America's bus transport system. The bus boycott led consequently to the Browder v. Gale court case in 1956.
In Browder v. Gale, African American plaintiffs, such as Martin Luther King Jr. and Claudette Colvin, said that their rights were being taken away because of the color of their skin. The court voted 2-1 that the community indeed denied and deprived plaintiffs and other Negro citizens similarly situated of the equal protection of the laws and the due process of law secured by the 14th Amendment. The U.S. Supreme Court affirmed this ruling, and now with the highest court in their favor, the victorious African Americans ended the bus boycott.
The impact of this ruling was immense. It inspired many other African Americans to fight for their rights, changing society into what it is today. Without the compromise within Browder v. Gale ruling, racism would have continued to grow, and African Americans would still be discriminated against today.
On March 2nd, 1955, Claudette Colvin stood up for her civil rights by refusing to give up her seat even after police enforcement in Montgomery, Alabama. She was a victim of conflict due to unjust segregation that occurred until the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Though she was arrested, the result of her actions and the compromise that followed were astounding. Her bravery and determination instigated the Montgomery bus boycott and a successful lawsuit against segregation that was later passed in the Supreme Court. Due to her altruistic efforts, blatant racial discrimination and segregation came to an end.